Hello everyone, I welcome you to this new live session with H&N International. I'm Juliana Armijo, Key Account Manager for South America. Today, we'll be talking about future of the layers, addressing some topics like the continuous progress in different characteristics to obtain a balanced selection between feed efficiency, egg quality, egg weight, laying rate, fertility, hatchability, adaptability, and livability. As you can see, this will be a very interesting session. This presentation will be conducted by David Cavero, our Chief Geneticist. David is graduated in agriculture engineering and have a PhD degree in animal production and breeding. Since 2006, have been working in the layer breeding industry as a geneticist. David is a very busy professional and today it is available for us. If you have any question, please write them in LinkedIn comments and David will be answered then in live at the end of his presentation. Remember, in case of technical problems on LinkedIn, there is a backup broadcast on the H&N website, and the link will be in the LinkedIn comments. Let's go with David's presentation.
What are we doing now in the genetic department, and what can you expect from the birds in the future? So I always want to make a small overview. So actually breeding is not really new. That's something that started already in the past. So when we started to domesticate the birds, that was the first time that or at that time they were choosing the birds that fits better to live with the humans, birds that were able to search for feed on their own. But the modern poultry breeding started roughly in the 30s, where we started to capture individual information with trap nests, and at that time, they started to select already based on the phenotypes of the birds. Afterwards, around the 80s, we were developing different models, more complicated, not only using the phenotype of each individual bird, but also from the relatives, and put this information also into the model using multi-trait models, so putting different traits in this model, using the correlation, the relationship that there is between different traits, and in this way we were able to make better prediction of the value of the birds. Then, some years ago, we started to use in a routinely based also molecular information. So we had some genomic information of the birds, and this has given us a further improvement in terms of accuracy when we are making the selection. And what we are seeing in the last years is what we are seeing in our life. So we have more sensors, cameras everywhere. We have massive information coming from different sources, and then is the challenge, how to use this big data, how to integrate it, how to define new traits, and how we can improve even further our birds. So coming to our real life, that's how our farms looks like. So as you can imagine, our birds should be in the best conditions, so free from any kind of diseases. So when we are sending our parent stock to you, to the different countries, we have to assure that this material is really free from any kind of disease. And in these houses, the birds has the best conditions, so no issues with climate, best feed, and no exposure to any kind of disease. The birds that we have in these farms are mainly in 3 different kind of systems. So most of our birds are in single cages where we can really collect individual information for each single bird for many different traits. Then we have birds in group cages as well, where we are putting the birds in families, and in this way we can collect information about social interaction, how are they producing when they have some social stress. If there are families that are more prone for feather pecking, then we can detect them in this system. And since more than 15 years, we are also testing our birds in a cage-free environment. So the birds can move wherever they want, and once they go into the nest, we can collect information about production. But we know that that's not the reality that you have in your farms. So since we want to have a bird that can adapt also to your conditions, we are also producing relatives, so birds, where we know the pedigree, and we are sending them to different countries all around the world. And then we are putting them also in family cages, and we are collecting this information and using this information to select our birds so that we can assure that our birds are robust, are resilient, and they can cope with different challenges on the field. So that's the structure that we have in the laying breeding. You know it very well. So the pure lines, grandparents are in our hands, in the hands of the genetic companies, and the first step that our customers are getting are the parent stock, and then locally they are producing the commercial layers that the egg producers are receiving. As I mentioned before, we are capturing all this information in the pure lines, and we are adding the field test where we are testing the birds in different locations worldwide, and we can combine this information, make our genetic evaluations, and then based on these evaluations, we can really detect the best birds. The best, normally around 10% of the birds are selected, and based on this selection, we are producing genetic improvement. We are improving the performance of the birds. That's in the pure line level, but then these improvements are passed through this multiplication process to all different layers since they arrive the commercial layer, so since when they arrive the field. So we are collecting more than 40 different traits. For sure, traits related with laying rate, with egg quality, feathering, the feed intake, the robustness or livability of the birds, how good they adapt to alternative systems, and also for parent stock, important birds that has a good fertility and hatchability. So this is just to show kind of group of traits that we are taking into account. As mentioned, we are taking into account more than 40 different traits, and then we are putting them together, so we are weighting them based on the importance that these different traits has, and we are combining them into an index. And this number is this index is the number we are using to rank all the birds, and at the end, taking the best 10%. And in this way, what we are doing is make a balanced selection. So we are taking all different traits at the same time. So for a geneticist, it's important not to make a big jump in one trait and maybe making some back step in other ones. The idea is to move all traits in a positive way, maybe sometimes not as fast as we would like, but at least the direction, all traits should move positively. That's the idea. It's not the one trait or the other that make our birds better. It's the combination, the harmonization of all different traits which makes our birds so unique. So that's what we want to hear from our birds. Probably we are not the best in one specific trait, but taking our birds into account across all different traits, you would see that our birds has no holes. They are very competitive in all traits. Maybe not the best one in one specific trait, but is really very competitive in all trades. That's the idea, that's why the way we want to select our birds. Really very competitive, very robust, and having no issues with any kind of trade. For sure, one of the most important traits is the daily egg number. So we are collecting every day the egg production for every single bird of each line. That's the way we are doing it. So we have, we have different scanners and tablets, and the idea is to go through, and in general, all the birds are laying an egg. So what we are doing is just scanning the cages where there was no egg. And in this way, we are trying to do it everything as easy as possible and as fast as possible. And only saleable eggs are recorded. So no breakage, no eggs with thin cells are going to be recorded. And so here I can show you the flock. That's a pure line flock of white birds, one pure line bird. And here in red, you can see the average production of this flock. I put as a reference, in this case, the standard for a nick chick product, so that you can see. Normally, we would expect that the commercial layer, since it's a cross of 4 different lines, the performance of these crosses should be better than the pure line, but you have to take into account that the pure lines are under the best conditions, single cage, no diseases, the best feed, so that's why production of pure lines is normally very good. And then to see how selection works, I just put the best 15% in one group, that's the blue curve. And then you can compare how are the best birds performing compared to the average. So you can see that there is no big differences at the beginning, so start of lay is not making a big difference. When we have the peak of production, actually you see it already in your flocks. So we have most of the flocks producing at 97, 98%, so there is not really big options to make improvements at this phase, since the birds are producing 1 egg a day for months. So here the differences are not too big. But the biggest difference is at the end. So in persistency, here is where the differences between the best birds and the average birds are getting more obvious. That's the phase where we are putting more emphasis in our selection, trying to increase production, and in this way we are also extending the production cycles. And that's something you can see also here. We are testing our birds already for more than 100 weeks, and this is going to be in the future even longer. So sometimes we are getting the question if there is somewhere a limit, and I always say that probably we could not make too big improvements here in peak of production, but as you can see here, persistency, there is a lot of space, and we will have here an open end. So we will go for 100 weeks, for 110, 120. That's just a matter of time in one single cycle, so without molting. That's just to show you that when we are selecting for a higher persistency, higher production rate, what we are also increasing is the laying sequences. So normally the birds lay in sequences. And what we can see from this flock that I was showing you is that most of the birds are already laying at least one time, more than 100 eggs at a time without making any pause in between. And we have even birds that are laying more than 200 or even 300 eggs on a row without any kind of pause in between. And that's something that is increasing with the time. So normally that's the profile that we are seeing our birds. So they are laying 100 days, making a pause, and then laying the next sequence, maybe 90 days, making a pause, the next sequence with 70 days. And in this way, that's how the birds are normally performing. So it's important that you are giving these birds what they require. So otherwise, if we are not giving them the adequate feed or the adequate nutrient, better to say, then these best performing birds are going to be the ones that are going to suffer more. And that's something how this has been increasing this number of eggs along the time. When I started in the company in 2006, we had our management guides only until 80 weeks, and that was even quite long for egg producers at that time. So the birds were producing 363 eggs at that time, and you can see that with the time we have been increasing the production cycles to 90, 95, 100 weeks, and the next management guide that we will produce, probably we were talking about 105 or 110 weeks, because that's something that is already on the field. There are some egg producers keeping the birds already until more than 100 weeks. So that's something that is going on. That's the work of the geneticists, increasing the number of eggs that are produced per hen. But that's due to two facts. First of all, the production rate, but also the eggshell strength. So it doesn't make any sense if the hens are producing eggs with a bad eggshell quality, and these eggs are not coming until the customer. If this is not happening, then the egg producer is getting not an economic impact on their production. So that's why it's really important that we have not only a good production rate, but that the eggshell is also excellent at all the ages. So selecting for a good eggshell strength has some advantages. So we are reducing the waste. So if we don't have so many seconds, we are reducing the waste that we are producing. Also, one of the most important things for the egg consumers is, or probably the first thing is, when they are buying a product, especially food, they are looking for a product that is healthy, that has no risk for the health. And that's something that we can better protect in an egg that has a good eggshell. So working for improving an eggshell has or is in line with food quality, making a product that is better for the consumer. And as I mentioned before, only if we have a good eggshell quality, we can extend the production cycles of the hens. And that's what we normally are, the selection improvement that we are making in the last year. So we are talking about 0.8 newtons or 1 newton more per generation. Maybe newtons is not saying you too much. Just to give you a reference, we tend to say that 40 newtons of breaking strength is kind of a good eggshell. So if every, let's say, 5 to 8 generations, we are moving the birds at this good quality to a very good one. So here to show you how is this genetic trend based on different years, we can see the breaking strength at 55 weeks, and the red curve is with 85 weeks. So you can see that both lines are increasing. So we are increasing the breaking strength not only at an early age, but also and especially at an older age. So here, the trend at 85 weeks is even higher. And also what you can see is that after, let's say, 7 generations of selection. Now the birds at 85 weeks has an egg quality that is the same as it was 8 years before or 7 years before at 55. So we are keeping this good eggshell quality for longer time. Another parameter of egg quality is egg weight, and we know, and you will hear about it, there are different factors like light stimulation, body weight, the feed that we are giving to our birds. This will have an impact on egg weight, and that's a tool that you have in your hands also to drive the egg size to the needs of your markets. But that's also one parameter that has a good heritability. Heritability is a very important parameter for geneticists. It goes from 0 to 1, and the higher the heritability is, the easiest it is for a geneticist to make improvements. That means how much of the variation is caused by genetics. The egg weight is probably one of the most tricky traits, since different countries has different requirements. So sometimes it's not easy to make an improvement that is in line with all countries. That's why the strategy, especially in whites, where there is more variation, more variability in terms of egg weight requirements, we decided to make different birds with different egg weight profiles. Since there are countries, like could be Israel, that could be Spain, where they want to have a high egg weight with eggs that are more than 68 or 70 grams. And we have countries like it could be Mexico, where they don't want to have eggs that are heavier than 52 grams. So for this, we have prepared different profiles. The average one would be the Nick chick, and then we have the crystal Nick, which has roughly 1.5 to 2 grams less than crystal Nick, and we have super Nick, which has 1.5, 2 grams more than Nick chick. And then each country is taking the bird that better fits the requirements of the market. But in general, the goal is to have the maximum number of eggs, depending on the country, on the desired class. So to make a fast egg weight increase, and then try to keep this egg size as flat as possible. However, for browns, as I mentioned, we have only one product since the markets are not so different, but still you have the possibility with what we have said, with management, with lighting program, with feed, you can go with the same bird to have eggs of 64 grams, or you can go for an egg size, let's say 66. So it's quite easy to go 3 grams above or below. For sure, if you go for a higher egg size, you will have less eggs. At the end, the egg mass is going to be quite similar. So we are talking about going to 100 weeks or even farther, and many times when we are visiting you, you are telling us, okay, now I have a flock of 50, 60 weeks, so what should I do to go to 100 weeks? And our answer is always, well, probably your question comes too late. So you have to start already with the beginning of your flock. So reading has been always very important, but now when we are going for longer cycles, longer production cycles, the reading is getting more and more critical. So if we are not doing a good job during the first 18 weeks, we cannot expect to have a good flock and to be able to keep this flock in production for more than 100 weeks. So what can we do during the reading to know if we are doing a good job? Measuring body weight and the uniformity of the flocks. 2 tools that you have to monitor on your flocks. And if this flock is performing good, is going, developing good in terms of body weight until during the first 6-7 weeks, that's the most critical part. So the first, that we are keeping the body weight during these first 6 weeks. Then if we have a vaccination program that is well adapted to the region that we are working, then the birds will develop a good immune system. If the birds are not well developed, if they were not running in the standards, then these birds, it doesn't matter what kind of vaccination program we are applying, then the birds cannot develop this immune system. So that's really critical. And then once that we have done it, when we go to the 10 weeks, 11 weeks, then the birds will start to have some kind of undefined development, so more accumulation of fat. That's where we have to start making the feed intake capacity development. And this will help the birds to achieve a good feed intake capacity earlier and help these birds when we are transferring them to the production farm that they have this good eating capacity and then they have the possibility to cope with different challenges. And then if we go for alternative system, probably not so important for you, then we have to take care that the birds are moving well in the system. We want to go for 100 weeks, so we need a bird with a good bone stability. And that's why we started to measure bone quality in different ways. So we were using palpation of the keel bone. And we have started also several projects with X-rays. So we are making X-rays of the birds, and then we are making bone density, and also seeing if the birds have some kind of fractures in the tibia, in the tarsus. And we are using also this information to improve the quality of the bones of our birds. In the keel bone, it has been quite hard to measure it. Based on X-ray, the adaptability was not really good, so it's a bone that, due to the structure, is not easy to measure. So that's why we are using for it more the palpation. What we are collecting here with the X-ray is more the tarsus and tibia tarsus. And contrary to the general opinion that was mentioning that the birds that are laying more, they are going to be the ones that are more stressed, has more metabolic stress. They have to move the calcium from the bones to the eggshell, and in this way they will have more problems. However, what we see is that there is no negative correlation between bone quality and persistency. On the contrary, so the birds that has better production normally tends to have better bones. There is also no link with breaking strength, so the birds that has a better eggshell quality and are producing more eggshell are not necessarily the ones that has worse bone quality. What we see is that there is a negative correlation with early maturity. So the birds that tends to start earlier to produce eggs, they might be the ones that are more exposed to bone quality problems. So from here, the learning that we should take is that we need to develop good pullets that are well mineralized and that are ready to start laying before we start to stimulate them, to don't force them to start when they are not prepared, and we might end up with some problems with bone quality. So that's also important in terms of management of birds. In terms of feed efficiency, we are collecting individual feed intake with these feed troughs for all our birds, for all of our lines, and we are doing it at the greatest nutrient demand, so around 30 weeks. And when we are selecting, we don't want to focus too much in terms of feed conversion ratio, how many kilograms of feed are they eating to produce 1 kilogram of eggs. We have in mind more the income over feed cost. So we are thinking more in an economic way. A bird that is eating a little bit more than the average, if they are producing more than average, it's going to be more efficient in terms of economy. So it's bringing more money back, since the prices of the eggs is normally higher than the prices of the feed. And in this way, we are selecting birds that don't demand a high density diet, so they are more flexible, and then you can play around more with raw materials that you have locally. So our birds can adapt to a high density diet that we have in the US and eat 104, 105 grams, but it can also works very well when we have more diluted feeds like we have in Europe with 125, 130 grams. And it's the same bird. So she can adapt, she has the capacity to eat and to adapt to the diet that we are giving them. Just to explain you a little bit more this income over feed cost, we are thinking in a conversion of money into money and not kilogram into gram, kilogram to kilogram, which I think is more important for you as egg producers. So as you can see here, the different cost that, or the fraction of cost that we have for the egg production, you can see that 60 to 70% of the egg production cost is due to feed. So it's the major cost that we have in production. So it plays a major role when we are thinking in an economic way. So the income over feed cost means we have to calculate how much money are we making with the egg production that we have. So the eggs that we are producing times egg prices. And then it depends on your country. Are you selling in kilograms? Or are you selling, how many eggs are you producing in a scale of large, medium, extra large? Well, you can put it here, and then you can calculate how much money you are doing. And then if you take out how much money are you paying for your feed, which is 60 to 70% of your production cost, you are getting a good parameter of how good you are doing it economically. So it should be something that is really important for you to know how good or how bad are you working. And that's something that we know that is important for you, and that's how we try to select the birds. Birds that are making or transforming good money into money. We are also measuring different quality traits, like the albumin quality, or in Brown's blood and meat spots that you have it's normal to have an incidence of 5-8%. In whites, there is almost no incidence of this kind of blood and meat spots. And also, we are measuring the yolk percentage as an indicator of the percentage of solids, which is important in some countries when they are making egg products. So they need to have a specific amount of solids. Then we have the eggshell color, which actually has nothing to do with the nutritional content of the eggs, but is really important because it's the presentation of the product. And it's good to have an egg that is really appealing for the consumer. If they are looking for a white, a tinted, or a brown egg, it's good to have an attractive color that is uniform, and that's what we are doing. So we are using this device, a Minolta device that is used in the automobile industry. and we are selecting for eggs, doesn't matter if it's a white or tinted or a brown, eggs that are really attractive, good eggshell color, dark color in the case of browns. So we are the darkest color in the industry, and that this color it lasts. So it's not only at an early age, but also you will have this attractive color at an advanced age. As mentioned before, we have not only birds in single cages, but also in group cages, and we are putting them together within a family. So all the birds from one cage are coming from the same family, and in this way we can detect families that are more prone for feather pecking or that has not a good feather quality. And with this information, we are selecting for lower mortality, birds that are more calm, and birds that has a good feather cover. These birds are not beak treated, so none of our birds are beak treated. And in this way, we are putting them in families, because otherwise, if they would just be a mix of different families, we could see which has been the victim, but we cannot detect the aggressor, which one was the one producing the pecking. But in this way, since they are all coming from the same family, we know which families are more prone to it, and these families will not be selected. And then we have the system in a cage-free, so pure lines, and with the use of this transponder that are binding to the leg, we can capture information of the nesting behavior. So the birds can move freely into the system, and then when they go into the nest, then there is an antenna in the nest, so when the birds come into the nest and is setting, the door is closed, so these are individual nests, and then we can individualize a bird, and this transponder is read by the antenna, so we know which bird is sitting in one nest, and if this hen is laying an egg, the egg is rolling and is passing through this egg sensor, sending a message to the computer, so we know when a bird has entered into a nest, how long this bird is sitting there, is this hen laying an egg, and in this way we have really individualized information, so we don't know if one hen is laying an egg in the floor, but if she's doing it, then she will not have this day an egg in the nest. And indirectly, by selecting eggs in the nest, we are reducing the number of floor eggs. Also, it's nice information, so to see in this system how the birds are doing. So as I mentioned before, there are many birds laying in long cycles, long sequences. So in this case, that was 269 eggs in 269 days. And you can see that almost every day at the same time, she was laying an egg. So the oviposition time, when we are taking a look into it, is getting closer and closer to 24 hours. And really, the hens are going at the same time every day to lay an egg. For sure, still there are some birds, as we saw in the books, when there was laying sequences where every day, every next day, the hen was laying a little bit later, and at some time, they were making a pause. In this case, you can see here, by taking a look into these profiles, you can see that probably this one was a floor egg, because it was more or less at the same time, and whenever it is happening, this kind of later, and at some point is making a pause, this is really one day off, and this egg is probably one egg that was laid on the floor. For us, at the end, important is how many of these eggs are laid on the nest. And as I told you at the beginning, we know that the breeding farms is not are not the real world, so we have different kind of production all around the world. So we have open houses, closed houses, we have hot climate countries, cold weather, we have birds in cages, in alternative systems, even in free range, and the birds are the same. So we are sending birds to different locations, and it doesn't matter what kind of situation they have, they should perform well. So that's why we are sending the birds to different countries, and we are making different tests. And again, the same as it was in group cages, we are putting the birds into families. We are not making any kind of big treatment. We try to make even and select locations where we can play around with the feed and even giving them some more diluted or even unbalanced feed on the field to see how our birds are reacting to these kind of challenges. And then we collect, as in other places, egg production, egg quality traits, but the most important traits under these systems is livability and pecking or plumage condition of the birds. So that's really the most important source to make our birds more resilient and more robust. Then I was saying that since 2010, roughly, we started to use, in a routinely basis, more molecular information. So we have customized SNP arrays, so we are analyzing around 50,000 markers, so that are distributed all around the genome. And for us, it's not really important to find a specific area with a specific gene that has an impact on one trait. What we are doing is just putting all markers at the same time. It's the so-called genomic selection. And by doing this, we can make a pedigree check, which is a byproduct. So in the past, we just had to trust what the people was doing on the farm, on the hatchery, to trace back the pedigree. We couldn't really check it. But now, with this information, I can really say who is the father and who is the mother of each individual chick. So we are taking a blood sample at one day when they hatch, and with this blood sample, we are making this, we are getting this molecular information, and I can make a parentage assignment. Then, by using this information, we can use more complicated models. So we are putting this information also into the models, and in this way, we can make the breeding value of the birds more accurate. We can make a better use of the genetic variation that we have in our lines, and we can do it faster. So we are taking the blood sample already at day old, and then we can start selecting already when the birds are mature. So I don't need to wait to have the production, the performance of these birds. By using the molecular information of these birds, I can already make a prediction of the breeding value with a very accurate, in a very accurate way. And I have to mention that all this is just an analysis of the molecular information. I'm just looking into the genome of the birds, but I'm not modifying. So we are not making any kind of modification. So that's also important to mention. It's just an analysis and see what markers these birds has. We are not changing anything. And at the end, with this information, we are making more genetic gain. So that has been what we have been doing until now, and then what can we expect in the future? Well, We are going more and more to cage-free environments. And in these environments, it's important also to know how the birds are behaving. And it's not easy to check how the birds are behaving in a group. Once that they are not in a cage where we can really see what is going on, when they are moving all around the house, it's not so easy. So we need individual information. So we need a system, and we cannot put a single person just looking around what the birds are doing. So we need more cameras, different sensors, different systems that are combining the information and then using some kind of artificial intelligence using this data, because it's a massive amount of data. And then with this, we can or we could work more in this direction, so improving the behavior of the birds. So we have started some projects, and the first one that we started was a collaboration with the University of Valencia. And we were working just, in this case, it was with pictures. And the idea was, once that we have birds in a cage-free system, we were weighting them at some point. And when we were weighting them, we were making a score of plumage condition. That was based as we do it regularly, so in a scale 1 to 9, and then the operators were doing this. But at the same time, we were taking these pictures, and we were using a neuronal network, in this case, and with these algorithms, we were making, based on artificial intelligence, with these pictures, we were getting a score that were really objective. It matched quite good with the subjective score that we were doing, or the farm people were doing on the farm. But as you can see here, that's really a discontinuous score, and what we were getting is in a continuous scale, which is giving us an additional advantage when we are modeling this trait. So this was quite easy and works pretty well, because it's a picture, and with pictures it was, as we were expecting, much easier to work. We are fixing one single bird, and that's easy. But then, what happens if we have not only one bird, but we have many birds there? Well, we could stop, make a picture, and then start trying to put something, but then, well, the first question is to recognize all the objects as if there is a hen or not. And the second one is, once that I have detected a hen, how can I track them? How could I know which bird is which? And that's where we are working now. So in the system that you have shown before, so we have this nest, we have the transponder, so whenever they are going into the nest, we know which bird it is. And then the idea is to work with these new algorithms to trace these birds. And it looks something like this. It's not the final stage, so we have started to work on it, but just to give you an insight how this works. So you can see that the bird's still tracking, even when it's jumping. The idea of this hen is still continue, and this is everything automatic. So I'm not making anything. Once that I have trained the model, the algorithm, to work with it, it is making this assignment. It's not always perfect, and we are still working on it. There are some objects, some birds that are not really detected, but in general, it doesn't look too bad. And that's the idea, to work with this information to be able to trace each single bird in one cage-free environment, and then see, are one specific bird pecking the other ones? Are they piling? What kind of movement do they have? And even kind of fitness. So if we are seeing that one bird is normally running 2 kilometers, and during 1 week is just moving 200 meters, it might be that this bird is not feeling good. It could be some subclinical diseases. And in this way, we could use this kind of information to define new traits. So that's really the future, and that's where we are more focused now. So just the last slide to the take-home message. Well, we are increasing the productive life of the birds, as you have seen. We are continuously improving the quantity and the quality of the eggs, so the profitability of the egg producers is our goal. We are testing our birds in different environments to make our birds resilient to different challenges that can happen. And we are trying to use the latest technologies to be always ahead in terms of genetics. So with this, I thank you very much for your attention.
Here we are with David. How are you, David?
Hello, good afternoon, Juliana. Good to see you.
Great, thank you. Good to see you too. I'm happy to be here to share your knowledge with the audience. That was a very good presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much also to the audience, to everybody that is following this event online. And yes, happy to answer all the questions that they might have.
Great. To the audience, remember sending your questions in the comments here on LinkedIn. I have a first question for you. Are we approaching the biological limits of production, feed efficiency, and reproduction in commercial layers?
Well, that's a good question, and that's something that I'm getting this question from time to time. Yeah, so we are selecting our birds for several decades already. So if you remember, H&N celebrates this year this 80th anniversary. So long time selecting in closed pools. So the performance has been increasing generation by generation. So for sure, at the time of peak of production, probably we are very close to the limit. So most of the birds are laying an excellent egg every single day for months and months. So probably in this phase, we are getting really close to the biological limit. But what we have been seeing is that there is still a lot of space at the end of production. So maintaining a good health, good fitness production at the end of production, at the end of the cycle, has been the main focus that we have been or that we have right now. So there's still a lot of space for improvement at this end. So we are going for extended cycles for more than 100 weeks, expanding the production life of the bird. So I would say we have not achieved the biological limits in this phase.
Mm-hmm. And how layer breeding programs balance genetic gain with animal welfare, especially regarding skeletal health, immune function, and behavioral traits?
Well, when we are selecting, we are not only focusing on a couple of traits, so we try to have a holistic view with quite complex breeding goals where we are including many different traits, considering also the genetic correlation that you might have between the different traits. And at the end is find a good balance between production, reproduction, and animal welfare traits. So the idea is at the end to have a more sustainable production. And for sure, to get into this is about collecting information, more and more information and the different environments, so that at the end we can guarantee that the birds will have a good production, a good immune competence, and a general viability.
Mhm.
Also, in the last years, we are getting different tools that we have seen in the presentation. So also recording the behavior of the traits in a more automatic way is giving us additional tools, and we can define different traits to even make a better balance in selection, so that at the end we have not only a good production but also a good animal welfare.
Mhm. To the audience, feel free to send us your questions. Don't be shy, please. I I have a question here in LinkedIn from Nicholas Joseph. What is the ideal IOFC?
Mhm. Well, at the end, that's for the ones that are thinking what is AOFC is the income over feed cost, which we use as a kind of economical parameter. So it's the amount of money that I'm doing when I'm selling the eggs, and I'm taking out the cost that I have for the feed. So it's a way of measuring the efficiency, but not in the traditional way, kilogram by kilogram, but more in terms of euros that I'm investing in feed and how much money I'm getting back out of the birds. So in this case, the highest profitability I can make out of the birds, the best. As long as I can maintain a good performance, a good animal welfare in my production, the higher the value, the more money I'm making with the birds.
Mhm. And in a diverse and global market, what are the most effective strategies to select the best bird that can thrive across varied production systems?
Um, well, we are, as a geneticist, our job is always try to see what's gonna happen in the market. So the birds that we are selecting today, they are gonna come into the field 3 to 4 years later. So we need to have kind of a glass ball to see or to foresee what's gonna happen and what's gonna be the future requirements. And in this way, we have to start preparing the bird for this situation. Um, and more than that, if we want to have a so kind best bird, we have to see that this bird is able to adapt to different conditions, that can cope with different kind of management, different feed. So that's why we are testing, as you have seen in the presentation, our birds in many different conditions and try to have a bird that can deliver what most of the markets are asking for.
Perfect. And what role will AI and big data play in improving breeding accuracy and adaptability in the next decade?
Well, we are seeing it in our real life. So AI and big data is getting more and more into our routinely life. So We have now many different cameras, sensors, so we can really collect information automatically in a very routinely way. So the way we can define our traits are more accurate. So it's not anymore that we are measuring egg weight with 30, 50, 80, 90, 100 weeks. So we can have really from every single bird every day a measurement of any kind of egg quality based on computers, cameras, sensors, drones. So we can really have a huge amount of data that we can use to define new different traits. For sure, it needs a start investment to get into it, but afterwards we can do it in a very efficient way with lower cost. So this is really helping us to increase the amount of data that we have. Um, this kind of information is also recorded without the need to handle the bird. So it's possible to get this information with less stress for the animals, so they don't even perceive that we are measuring something. And at the end, the cameras and the different algorithms that are running afterwards, they are able to make a more objective evaluation or measurement of the trait. So there is no influence anymore of one person that is maybe getting tired during the day. So I would say that these kind of phenotypes are or can be recorded in a more accurate way. We can make more measurements about the traits, so making them more robust. So in this way, I would say that this will help us for sure to make our breeding values more accurate and improve the genetic gain that we are making with our selection.
Mm-hmm. And about climate change, I think is very important now. What is resilience and how can breeding programs select birds to adapt better to climate change?
Yeah, so in the past we used to talk a lot about robustness, rusticity. Now it's getting more and more in the direction of resilience, which means like the ability to cope with any significant source of stress, so that in this case the birds are not affected, or they can recover very quick from any kind of adverse event. So let's say if there is um, a day where the temperature is getting too high, so it's really hot, then some birds might be able to cope with this better than other ones. And that's what we are trying to do. So test birds under commercial situations where we have more variation in terms of temperatures, in terms of impact of natural light, feed quality, the incidence of diseases. And under these conditions, under these commercial conditions, we are able to measure better the susceptibility of the birds and the resilience. So are there birds that are more are able to cope with these situations and adapt better to it without compromising their performance? Then these are the ones that we will select. So we are capturing information from relatives in the commercial environment, using this information to select the relatives that are in our breeding farms. That's the way we are improving the resilience of our birds.
David, and with increasing consumer demand for sustainability and animal welfare, how can breeders respond to shifting market preference without reducing profitability?
Well, as I mentioned before, so we have to force in also what's happening and to try to force in these changes in consumer habits and legislation, regulation. And that's something that we are seeing in many markets. there is an increased concern about animal welfare, about the environment. And in this way, what we are doing is including generation by generation more and more traits that are related to these topics, more traits related to animal welfare, also taking into account that our production or the production of our birds are more environmental friendly. And the end is trying to put them together in one index and try to balance at the time of selection. And for sure, in the last decades, we are giving more and more weight to these kind of traits, taking care about animal welfare and environment than it was in the past, where mainly was focus on production and efficiency, so several decades ago.
Mm-hmm. We have another question. Is data coming from actual commercial farm used in the evaluation of the genetic program? I mean, data coming from systems like Kai or others like it. Are they valuable as a tool to evaluate the genetic gains?
They are definitely crucial for us as breeders, because as mentioned, we have to think what's going to happen in the next years. And for this, we have to get really very fast information and good information how our birds are performing on the field. So that's why we have continuously meeting with producers, with customers. We visit also farms in different countries to get really a feedback how the birds are performing and what are the major challenges that our birds or the birds in general are facing, how our birds are performing compared to the competitors. So for sure, this commercial data is very relevant to help us to fine tune the direction of our breeding goal. However, that's not an information that is helping us. It's nothing that I can incorporate as such in the breeding program, since I would need then the relative information, so the pedigree information, to link both of them. So that's why the cross-line testing that we are doing are birds under commercial situations, but still the pedigree is known, so that I can make the link between breeding farm and commercial farm. In the case of the production information that we are getting from Kai is relevant because we need to know what is happening with our birds and how our birds are performing, but it's not an information that I can use one-to-one to select the birds as such.
Perfect. We want to thank you, David, for your presentation and for sharing your knowledge and experience.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really a pleasure for me.
And big thanks to everyone who joined us and sent your questions. We'll be taking a break during July and August, and we'll return with live session in September. I let you know that the next topic will be nutrition related in a roundtable format. Stay tuned and have a great day.